to make sure that we were covering all the bases. So in a couple of weeks, we'll be starting what is known as the water testing, where we're going to be teaching the residents of Detroit how to test their own water, how to document that, and then how to report that out, because we want to create more ambassadors on behalf of this work. The third part is that we, working with Nadia Gaber, and Nadia has just eloquently spoken to the research, the door-to-door research campaign. There's also going to be an extension of that because we want to make sure that it's fully covering every aspect of the city of Detroit. And then the fourth component is that our youth, our babies, are brilliant.
That's right.
And so they came into this work saying, we don't want you to just relegate us to just turn on the computer or just make sure that we can make your chart look nice, that we have something to really offer. And so under the leadership of Julia, where's Julia?
She just went out. She'll be right back.
Julia is the director of the youth division for We the People of Detroit. And what she has done, is just simply amazing. She has ensured that we are connecting our youth to legendary community activists that have just done a yeoman's job of holding this city together for decades. And through that connection, what they've done this year is they are being trained by Kate Levy to actually chronicle our own stories. We're not going to wait on anybody to tell our stories. We're going to tell our stories. So our children are going to be recording those stories. They will be coming to many of you, asking you for interviews. This is a part of us writing our own history.
That's right.
One of the things that Mama Watson told us all the time, don't just read history, make some. And so we want to be a part of making some history. There's also Holland. Is Holland in the room? Holland, stand up, please. Holland is another one of our babies. Here at Wayne State. She came by way of Eliza and Peter Hammer. And so what Holland is doing, Eliza had a beautiful idea. She said, Mommy, there's so much work that's gone into this water work. And I kept telling her, just the people you see doesn't document all the people that have done this work. And so we're asking all of you to be a part of collecting what we are calling the mapping of our own transformation. The mapping of our own transformation means that if you've done anything on this water movement, if you've been a part of mobilizing, educating, delivering water, just making sure your neighbors have water, we want you to connect, we want you to put your information into this pool, and then we're going to create a map of all of the activism that's happened around water. And it will be revealed during the Pioneers Conference in late October.
I loved it when I heard Monica say community power. We don't talk, for some reason we don't use the word power. We better start using that.
That's right. Yeah.
I would like to call on Diane and then Tom.
I have a question. Louder, Diane.
Wonderful work. But during the presentation, she seemed to indicate that people have life in these neighborhoods. And I don't believe that's the case. I worked for a while for United Community Housing Coalition. There were numerous people living in the dark without heat, could not afford and they're not public utilities, DTE, and that provides the heating water. So I was wondering if that would be corrected. And also to emphasize the role of the Great Lakes Water Authority. This was brought about through the Detroit bankruptcy under the supervision of Kevin Ford, the Great Lakes Water Authority. They've been trying for years to regionalize the Detroit Water Department.
Sure, they did a lot of that work.
So, until the emergency management took over. And it was negotiated during the bankruptcy, and all the terms of the Great Lakes Water Authority taking over in June 1st, I believe it was 2014, were part of that bankruptcy.
Nadia is going to answer the question. I think what we're speaking to is that a lot of things they did during the bankruptcy we know were illegal.
Bankruptcy itself was illegal.
That's right.
Never approved by the city. Never approved by the city.
And so the lens that we operated collecting data from was what the questions that the people had, questions that the community had around what had transpired, where was there still ownership, where should there be control, how much money had been accrued in terms of the debt. But I'll allow Nadia to speak to the research itself.
Yeah, I think I got that question. So the way the study was designed, because it's a disaster impact assessment, we asked people that have running electricity and heat. The overwhelming majority did, and when we asked people if they were on payment plans, most people talked about being on the DTE, either the low income self-sufficiency plan or they have a shut-off prevention program. And so we didn't actually really dig into the electricity and gas question in terms of how the payment plan is structured or whether people are keeping up with that. It wasn't in the questions that we asked, so I don't really have particular data on that. But people that we talked to did seem to be enrolled in those plans. So I think, again, that's a good point and probably an area that we could look into further, either in the next round of surveying or in the way that we analyze the data in terms of the affordability of those two payment plans, both under DTE and Detroit Water and Sewage Department.
I called on Tom, and the gentleman in the blue shirt,
Yes.
and Devida.
Thank you, people and everybody. In terms of trying to follow up on the previous discussions about whether and to what extent the water system, or as I like to call them, the regional water mafia, has control over their own operations, a thing we should all be aware of that's happening right now is their attempts to respond to the major flooding that occurred, in particular on the Lower East Side on July 8th, which also connects to their attempts to sort of respond to the major flooding in 2014, as well as the major flooding in 2011, 2 out of 3 in my own basement. What Gary Brown has said is that the buck stops with him, and within 4 to 6 weeks of July 8th, they expect to give us a report about what happened. I would think the community data collective, research collective might want to track this and find out. The final point, and the reason why it's so critical, is although this is wastewater, of course, rather than freshwater, it's really important for us to realize that the systematic underinvestment in the necessary infrastructure is of the essence of these shutoffs.
That's right.
And both as to the equity of the burdens and benefits of the system, and also as to the adequacy of the efforts that are being put forward by those who are in our employ to do it. We have to track these kinds of things. So I think that reframing the East Side Water shutoff investigation in terms of the kinds of issues that I'm talking about and that are in this report would be a really valuable thing to do.
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
Will Davis from the Detroit Water and Sewage Department retiree respond to that, because he has a whole analysis of what happened in 2014 and why.
Well, I will after the people I called on have their say. Yes, sir.
Yes. Just a quick comment. I've been reading about the privatization of water, municipal water supplies going on across the United States for nearly 15 years now. My name is Gregory Ford. So I wasn't surprised at any of the things that happened when Kevin Orr took over, because Jones Day is involved in a lot of that kind of work. So I'm just wondering if we know whether the shutoff, use of shutoff to seize land is happening anywhere besides here in Southeast Michigan. Because I haven't read about that, but I've read about the privatization.
Yes, one of the things that we've been talking to is we've been talking to groups out of Palestine as well as other parts of the country about doing a parallel study, because what we know from looking at Detroit, from looking at Philadelphia, looking at what's happened in St. Louis and Boston and Baltimore, many of the communities that are urban centers that have a high population of people of color are also under these egregious attacks, police brutality. Also, we know that in those communities that housing is under attack because of the predatory lending practices and also using water as a weapon of gentrification.
That's right.
And so what we hope to do is do an international study to look at the parallels of those policies as well as with displacement.
You know, I just want to lift that we the people are setting forth a model for all of us in our community to take charge of our own lives.
Say that.
And that there are resources of the Yahoo. You know, we have been told that we don't know anything, we don't have the sense to work through stuff. And this is a demonstration that we have everything we need. We need the commitment to follow through until you can come to the report that refutes all of the nonsense that we're experiencing. So it's all of our responsibility. When you hear something today, don't put it back on we the people to do this.
That's right.
This is all of our work.
That's
And you
exactly
can
right.
do the same. This is a model. They create a model for all of us
That's
to
right.
follow. Devida.
I just have one question. I just wanted to piggyback off of the gentleman in the blue, and that is, as you all are doing your research, Monica, and I know you always tell us this is not just the city of Detroit, it's not even just the nation, it's the world. And I was just wondering if you all were able to peel back to see if there were any global companies that is behind the privatization of water all over the world. And I was just wondering if we as people in the audience, if we knew some of those companies.
There have been articles in the Wall Street Journal on that very issue.
Well, what we know is several things. We know many of the banks that were able to be protected during the bankruptcy, that they also are an intricate part of the privatization of water around the globe. So there was no, we weren't in shock or in awe when we made that comparisons. What we also know is that Veolia, that sits in our own back door, that is headed up by the DeVos family. That Veolia has been instrumental in privatizing transportation, water, and land around the globe. They also have their hand a little bit in education.
That's right.
So it's not shocking when you find that Veolia had its hands in suggesting to the leadership of DWSD that they should privatize the internal operations. That Veolia also had its hands in convincing Flint that they should be able to drink water from a river that nobody in their right mind would tell anybody to drink from. Veolia also was instrumental in advising in terms of what corrosives should be added to the water.
That's right.
They decided that none should be added. And so when we look at these organizations and these businesses that have been instrumental in having their hands in the water system for us, then what we say is no. We say that Veolia has to go.
That's right.
If you look at St. Louis, if you look at Boston, they ran them out of town. They ran them out of town. How is it when we sit at the Great Lakes Basin, we provide water to 83% of the water that is consumed, bottled water that's consumed comes out of the Great Lakes. We sit on 20% of the world's freshest water. We know that we provided at one point water to almost half the state of Michigan came through DWSD. And so water being instrumental in part of just being able to live, to exist, then we gotta call the names out. And I get in trouble all the time. They say, well, you should not, don't really talk
Call
about
the names,
them.
baby.
I say their names. It's the DeVos family. And they set up the
I heard my name. Oh, okay. Antonio, who else was up there? Antonio?
Winston in the house.
I think you had spoken to towards the end. I mean, all of this represents an attack on the commons, and you spoke a little bit about education. It'd be really fascinating to see the closure of public schools mapped on top of the foreclosures of homes,
That's
mapped
right.
on top of the water shutoffs. And especially if you would look at that change and that development over on an interactive map over time, you would really see so many common trends, and I think the role of education should be, central in this.
I think Gaber said this was just part one, the beginning of the research, and actually the next book will be about education in our city and all this country. We will be able to do that kind of mapping, Antonio. But even not having done it so far, it's pretty clear to us that there is a coincidence between where the water shutoffs, the tax foreclosures are taking place and where schools are being closed.
That's right.
So when we understand the overall, the big plan, right, the big objective is displacement of whole neighborhoods, then, it's easy to see how those maps are going.
Yeah, because we've already mapped a lot of these things, so it was kind of now I'm going to sort of start a really concerted effort to force them I think we're already seeing some of those patterns.
We had two questions in the balcony.
Thank you for your hard work. The other question I have is that I think it was 3 years ago, Detroit Future Cities sort of projected the decommissioning widespread of neighborhoods, and I'm wondering if any of the maps that you've made are overlapped with the Detroit Future Cities plan, and is this what we're seeing in implementation of that plan now?
That's right.
Looking at the, looking at Detroit Future Cities framework for Detroit, is that overlapping evidence?
We did look at that. There are. Can't hear you. Use the mic. We did look at that, and there are probably relationships between the what's called innovation landscapes of the Detroit Future City.
Yeah, go ahead.
Future City plan and,
You're the director.
and neighborhoods for people to be displaced. But there's not been. I think what's important to note is that Detroit Future City is not really the blueprint for displacement. It's part of a whole apparatus of plans, of policies, of ideologies, of procedures that all yield displacement. So it's, I think it's a little bit, maybe we don't want to keep too much emphasis on that particular plan and think and step back and maybe look at the system that produced that plan and so many other things that are yielding displacement centers are concerned.
I have maybe just one thing to add to that, which is that one of the things that we found, which was really confusing, so we kind of started with that question, that was one of the first things that we found. And we found that in a lot of places in the Detroit Future City Plan, there's areas that are designated to sort of remain intact neighborhoods, and it's generally kind of like northwest and northeast. And those areas we actually are seeing are some of the hardest hit by water shutoffs and tax foreclosures. And so it kind of like opened up a whole other level of questions for us about, okay, so you see this plan, these neighborhoods are supposed to be protected and stabilized, but then we see these city policies that are really aggressively destabilizing those neighborhoods. So I think it's a complicated story, and I think we still have a lot more to learn.
I puzzled over that a whole lot, and what you have to realize is that you have to focus on which microphone.
Just talk loud.
You have to think about what is the target, and what is Detroit Future City target's land. You sort of look at the land and the pieces of that, and the overlay. When we did the original overlay, so we found it was way overbroad. Right? So it was not just the people in the vulnerable, high vacancy areas. It was much more broad or widespread than that. And if you step one step back and say, well, it's not just targeting land, they're targeting classes of people.
That's right.
When you add the notion this is not only a targeted campaign against land, but also a targeted campaign against categories of people who are not included in the future of Detroit, then it starts to make more sense. So you have to be very sensitive not only to the land component, the land is very important, but also the demographic component, the question of who has a stake in the future and who doesn't, who's valued and who doesn't. And I think when you step back and ask that question,
That's right.
a lot of the broad spreads or overbroad nature of that starts to make much more sense.
That's exactly right.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize, we're going to wrap it up, and you know, at these, let me be the facilitator. And so we have, I have 2 more minutes, I have 1 comment in the balcony, and then Monica is going to close out, and then afterwards,
Party.
so I'm going to call on the lady in the balcony, and then Dr. Ned, and then Monica.
I just wanted to echo again a citation to the people, the researchers, the volunteers, everybody who have sacrificed and is doing the hard work. My question is, does your study, your report, address the businesses and that have amassed huge water bills and their services are not shown?
on one of the maps, we make a comment about the fact that really the largest part of the bills around water are really not the bills of individual residents in the city, but the fact that corporate entities do not pay their bills, right, especially around sewage, and that there's been a real overestimation of how much money can be brought in around water, but really when it comes to shutoffs of folks living in Detroit, that's really a minor part of the money we're talking about in terms of that. Which is another reason for us to think seriously about all the ways the narrative coming from those in power, all the ways they tell us how to think about what's going on,
That's right.
So that we'll be totally confused, and so that we're more likely to believe that we, the people who live in the city, are incapable of self-governance,
That's right.
And that we're wanting more to pay for, cable TV, that we're wanting to pay for our water. It's really important, even not to be taken in by the fraud of the bankruptcy.
That's right.
All municipalities have debt, right?
That's right.
But why is it that ours, where we have a majority black population, right, why are those municipalities targeted, right? And this discourse about mismanagement, etc., just prevails.
That's right.
So what we hope that we showed in the maps is that there is indeed a confluence of oppression on people who are living in Detroit, and it seems to be about displacement of whole neighborhoods and communities, because the strategies target so many things at one time, right? Shutting off of water, tax foreclosures due to water debts, right? The combination of the policies around blight and demolition of homes, right? All of those things are working together to erase our communities.
That's right.
So it's really, really important to look at what is actually happening on the ground, and that's why the maps are so important, and not to be taken in by the rhetoric and the narrative that's being projected onto us. And I think so many of our people are taken in by that. So part of what we can do as organizers and activists, begin to talk about that with people and to put these maps in front of them and help them understand what's really happening.
Julie and I have a friendly PR announcement. Winston did an excellent job, didn't she? Moderator, let's give her a rousing hand for keeping us all under control. I just want you to know that Gwen came to us. She's been working with us to help grow We the People. We got our nonprofit status, we're working on organizational development, our bylaws are done, we're working on a 3-year strategic plan, and trying to figure a way to be able to, make opportunities not only for ourselves but for others. Because when we had jobs before we lost them due to emergency management, we funded We the People out of our pockets. Now we're like staying up all night trying to write proposals and beg people and whatever, but it's working. But Gwen came to us and said, I think we need to nominate Monica, We the People of Detroit, for a grant. It's called the Kind Grant. And remember those, have you all seen those expensive bars in the health food shelves, the Kind bars? Well, there's a Kind Foundation. And Gwen wrote up, nominated Monica. We worked on a document together. We felt really good about it when we submitted it. And there were almost 5,000 people that were candidates for this grant. Monica made the cut from almost 5,000 people down to 25 people. There's a second cut. Now it's down to 15 people. 6 people will be awarded a grant. The top grant is $500,000. And there are 5 for $100,000. They will make the decision the 31st of this month. I am asking 2 things, and Julia's going to tell you about the second. I'm asking for your prayers because we need financial relief. We need an undergirding. We continue to do this work, and we've been very prayerful. The second thing is we want to create some noise on social media, and I don't tweet, so Julia's going to give you some instructions.
I'm literally only up here because I'm the youngest person. But from what I understand, if you would help us generate buzz about Monica's amazing work, to help us get funding for these programs and this amazing effort that Deborah and Monica and Aurora and Cecily and Chris started, if you would create a tweet that says something along these lines. You can personalize it if you want. This fits. It's 1 character away. And share it on your social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever you are able to. We want to spread the word about the work that we're doing. And also, if you're sharing posts, this may be an awkward time for this announcement, but if you're sharing posts about this event in general, if you would use the hashtag mapping the water crisis, it'll help us to stay in touch with you and keep track of all of the buzz about our event. We worked really hard on this. Monica has worked really hard on this. And as you all know, she's amazing. Kind is such an understatement for Monica. So please share this. Please share your thoughts about this event. And just from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for coming.
Please join.
Amen.
I know I've been doing that for a couple of days. And the Community Research Collective, please stand up. All the people that worked on the book, that spent countless hours putting together data, recruiting other researchers and students, and lending their expertise and intellect to this. Councilmember Watson, Mama Watson, Mama Nadia have been such an anchor for us in terms of making sure, one, that we just had the confidence to know we could do it. We could do it. And then making sure we built our net wide enough so that you understood that we, the people of Detroit, is not the pride that you just see before you, that we have always embraced the ideology that we, the people, are the people of Detroit. Let's have hey, Melissa Mays. A round of applause because this could not have happened without everyone.
Just 2 people that we wanted to say thank you to. David Conklin. I don't know if David came out today or not, but he is our printer and he works with us. Oh, yes. Mentored many young people in our jazz legacy.
That's right.
The youngsters who are playing for our reception are part of her work, and they are called Next Generation.